Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Quantum Leap Season 1, Episode 15. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, this new leap that Ben finds himself in is in Alita, a public defender, which is actually really sad later on when Jen gives the statistic of like, yeah, public defender only on average gets to spend like 7 minutes with each client, because typically it's like you got hundreds of clients and stuff like that, which is kind of like, yeah, that's also the problem. Like a public defender, like, is super stretched thin, whereas like lawyer, like a paid lawyer is going to like kind of, they might be juggling multiple clients, but they are going to spend enough time, you know. But it's like a public defender, you're going to be so stretched thin. So, and I do love we get to see that in this episode, that there's at least like 2 other cases that Ben is having to deal with at the same time. Also, some interest. I think they did a great job too of like shifting things up a little bit, because obviously last episode Addison was able to really help out because obviously her experience in the military. But it's like, yeah, the only person here who has a situation with the law is Jen. Granted, she was on the other side of things because of her hacking, like she was, you know, like, but her time in jail, she did end up getting a law degree, which is like, I even love Ian be like, wait, you? It's like, yeah. Magic's like, you think someone like Jen's gonna sit in jail and do nothing? So it's like, yeah, you're the only one here who has some law experience to know. I mean, you know, on both sides of things. You became a lawyer in jail, but also you've been on the other side of things. So the person that Ben's defending is a kid named Camilo, who was accused of killing this particular gang member. Obviously, all the evidence points to him because he was the only. No, he was seen arguing with the victim. He was also the only person seen, caught on camera, seen entering or leaving the building. So, but yeah, my point I was bringing up before too is like Jen being the one stepping in, because that means a lot. Because even Magic's like, yeah, Addison, since Ben's been gone, Addison's been in that chamber like 24/7. So she has to. It's always been a situation of she's on the outside looking in, but at least she's had more of a front row seat. Now she has a back row seat now, and you can tell it's a new dynamic that both her and Ben had to deal with. Because Jen initially didn't want to do it because she's like, no, I'm not good with like the more emotional stuff like that. It's just like I think she's very much like, oh, I'm very like pragmatic about stuff. And just like, yeah, the emotional stuff doesn't come as easily to me. I mean, it's also probably easier between Addison and Ben, just because there is that like intimate emotional relationship between them. Whereas like obviously Jen and Ben are like really good friends, but still, you know. And I didn't even think about it until this episode also brought up an interesting thing, that Ben doesn't remember the rest of the team. He remembers Addison because obviously it makes sense. Like that part of his mind is triggered because of the fact that him and Addison are around each other enough. So a lot of those memories came flooding back a lot quicker about Addison. But the moment he saw Jen, he didn't recognize her because he doesn't remember anyone else on the team. I was like, that's interesting, because I thought the moment his memories of Addison returned, so would his memories of everyone else. But it's like, no, there's still kind of a blank space there. So. But I do appreciate it's so, and I think they did such a good job too of showing once again Jen's approach versus Addison's. Like obviously there's some overlap, but Jen's very much kind of like because a lot of her decisions this episode, I don't know if Addison would have necessarily made those, of being like, oh, like, because it turns out that Alita is the person that Ben had leaped into this episode. She's in a relationship with Vicky, who's on the other side of things. She works like she's like second chair or whatever to like the ADA Barnes in this episode, and it's like, I mean, it's a literal sleeping with the enemy type of situation, but they make it work, because I'm sure it's like, I mean, it's a complicated minefield because it's like it's the 80s. Plus, they're 2 women, and plus, the fact of the matter is she's on the other side of things, so that turns into a whole conflict of interest, and they've also got to keep it low-key for, I think, because of the whole them being to get up to women type of situation as well. It ends up being this really compelling story. Once again, it's just like, these stories could be, like, a movie all on their own, just like with this, you know, but, because in this particular case, once again, Camelo didn't actually do it, but, it doesn't matter whether or not he did it or not, because everyone thinks he did it. No one cares really too much if he's innocent or not. And even Alita was kind of setting up a deal, because he was going to initially get like 30 years, and he got it bumped down to 10, but Ben's the one that was like, no, don't take the deal. We're going to fight this, because you shouldn't spend a single time in jail, especially considering that 10 years he's away, his brother Leo gets recruited by the gang and ends up getting killed before he's able to get out, before Camillo's able to get out of prison. And he's been, that's why he got an argument with the gang, because the gang's been trying to recruit his brother to be selling drugs on the corners. And so it's like, he's been doing everything he can, because all they have is themselves and their grandmother. And it's like, Camillo's the one working so hard to like keep food on the table, like obviously like make sure they have money. And that's why Leo was like, I have no choice but to work for like this gang or whatever, because it's the only money we're getting in the household. Like, it's me and my brother and my grandmother. Like, that's all we have. Like, they don't have their parents anymore. So it's a terrible, struggling situation, and that's a, very sad aspect of it, that a gang is going to come after you because they feel like, oh, you're an easy target, because maybe they know about Leo's circumstances, and it's like, right, we need someone like you, and it's like they're taking advantage of the fact is that he's desperate for money type of situation. Sadly, this whole situation created a complicated circumstance for Alita and Nikki's relationship, when once again, Jen's like, yo, just take a peek in the file. It's like, no, I can't. I don't want to mess up the relationship. But Jen's like, yeah, but come on, Camillo's going to go to, once again, it's like, right, like, that's kind of, who cares about that? Let's focus on the fact that Camillo could end up going to prison for something he didn't do. Because it turns out, because Leo ended up letting this drop, that apparently everyone knew that the guy that died was a snitch. So it was kind of implying like, oh, a lot of people would have probably wanted him dead type of situation. And it turns out there were other people in the building that were talked to that the police did question, but it never came up as potential suspects. And one of them was Edwin Soto. Edwin is actually a gang member. Like, he's actually, like, he's associated with 2 other murders. And apparently he doesn't go down for those murders until like 11 years later. That was an interesting thing where like a kid lived in the same building, ended up finding Edwin's gun that he had stashed, and ended up taking it to school. And Edwin's fingerprints were found on it. It's like, cool, we can find the gun now. But even if you find the gun now, fingerprint identification isn't what it needs to be. But they could still compare the bullet from the gun to the bullets that were used in those previous crimes, and even potentially the one used in this crime, especially if Edwin used the same gun. But the fact is, even knowing Edwin's name was what caused some strife between Nikki and Alita, because it's like, oh, how did you know that name? Did you look through my files? It's like, no, I didn't. She ultimately ends up getting fired for it, because it turns out they end up finding out that they were missing a page in the police report. There was like a page missing, but now it's like, okay, was the ADA actually like holding that back, or did an intern or whatever just not print it? Turns out it was ADA Barnes was specifically holding back evidence. And the moment they presented, and the fact is, even Jim was like, why is he so okay with giving the evidence now? It's like, this seems a little too easy. Turns out the jackhole ended up removing Edwin's name from the list. And it's like, cool, you can't let him know that you know. So it kind of had to like smile and be like, yeah, no, everything's okay, Your Honor. So now it becomes a situation where, well, how do we ultimately end up proving this? Because it was able to show, Ben was able to show it to Nikki, like, no, he definitely removed Edwin's name there. Because the reason why Nikki was so fervent about protecting for protecting Barnes, is because it's like, right, he's my mentor, especially because his job was so important to her, because she's like, one more year and I get to be like, I get first seat type of situation. So that's why she didn't want to kind of rock the boat with her circumstances. But it's, and Ben had wondered, like, right, did you know anything about this? It's like, you buried this thing and you didn't even know why. And it's like, right, she didn't do it. This was all Barnes. And now she's seeing like, wow, so he really did do this. Like, he told her that Edwin wasn't anyone of importance, so it had no effect on the trial. But obviously it means a lot, because he's up for like re-election or something like that, or election or whatever, and he's trying to pad his profile with more and more cases. So it's because he wants to win, so he's going to do whatever it takes to win. So, but Once again, I love that the other elements of the trial. Jen ended up helping Ben give one of his clients a tip to give them money to pay for the dude's bail, because his girlfriend, she was like, oh, okay, here's some here, this bet will give you $5,000. That'll be enough to pay off this particular bail or whatever, because he's a guy that was kind of kicked out by his girlfriend and he was butt naked and all that. So, and then there's also the one where Ben's helping the guy get his bike back, and it's actually really sweet. He was like, oh, I need this bike, it's so important, I gotta do it for my uncle. And Ben's like, I'm not following. He's going to enter this race that's a bike race that's connected to kind of, it's for AIDS, because he had lost his uncle a year prior he's like, my uncle had died for AIDS, so it's like a kind of like a, I think it's like it is a charity thing for AIDS stuff. I was like, oh man, that's actually really sweet. Ben luckily got his bike back. Then they can later on use that to get to Edwin's place, and it's like they're looking for the gun, and Home Dude finds it, and it's like, whoa, don't open that. Feel it. Does it feel like there's a gun in there? He's like, yeah, it does. Is that a bad thing? It's like, nope. Come on. I was like, I love that. That was actually pretty dope. I like that, because it's like if you've seen The Lincoln Lawyer. I've never watched the movie, the Matthew McConaughey movie, nor have I read the book. But the fact of the matter is, there's the TV show on Netflix. It kind of does a similar thing where there's a major overarching case, but there's smaller cases throughout the series throughout the season that allowed that kind of play into like helping with like other things throughout the main plot. So it kind of reminded me of that in this regard. So, but ultimately, with the gun being brought in as evidence, the situation is now the ADA, now Barnes is, because of this, wants to go like, all right, now we'll plead him down to like a few years. It's like 4 or 5 years, and he'll be, no, we'll narrow it down, like he'll get out, in 4 to 5 years or whatever. And it's like, now, and that's the interesting thing, where it's like Ziggy was saying, like, yeah, at this point you can actually leap now if you take this deal. And for Ben, it's like, wait, what? It's like, wait, we take this deal, but he still gets to go away. It's like, yeah, Leo doesn't get involved, Leo doesn't end up dying, but still, it's like, why should Camilo have to go to jail for a single year for something he didn't do? I was like, that's crazy. I mean, once again, that even Ziggy was like, yeah, you've done your part, you've helped the situation, but it's like, it can still be better. And I think that's where the human element comes into it. Like, yeah, Ziggy's just a computer program, and I'm curious, is there going to be more to that? Are we going to have like a litlittle bit of a Doctor Who TARDIS thing of like, oh, the TARDIS is sentient, it's its own thing, but it's not until like once again, one of my favorite lines is the TARDIS being like, no, you thought you stole me. I stole myself a Time Lord. Like, I love that line when it's like, what is it, the Time Lord's wife or something like that, where like the TARDIS was inside of like a fake body for an episode or something like that. I want to say that was a Matt Smith. That was like had to be like a season series 6 episode, maybe series 7. I don't remember. I mean, once again, it was a Matt Smith season, so it had to be like anywhere between 5 and 7, but I would assume like 6 or 7. But either way, tangents and all that aside, I'm wondering if Ziggy will ever kind of get consciousness of their own. I mean, they are just like a program, but I'm wondering will there ever be, kind of like an AI thing of like it becoming sentient on its own, whatever the case may be. The point is, there's the human element of that decision of, well, let's not do that. But it's a 50-50 shot on if they don't take this deal. If they take it, hey, if they don't take it and they win, obviously Camilo goes free, but if they lose, he goes away for 30 years. So that's the rub of it all. And for Camilo, it's like, yeah, no one cares if I'm innocent, but for him, it's like, I have to do this because I need to be there for my brother, who's going to keep him off the streets, who's going to keep him on the straight and narrow. Which I did appreciate Ben telling Leo that story, because like Leo's has a hard time holding on to hope, because it's like, right, no one actually cares whether my brother did it or not. Like, he feels the same way Camilo does, but he tells Camilo about like, right, music helps plants grow. Now the fact, because of the frequencies and stuff like that from the music, but it's like, right, you don't see the music, but it's there. It's like hope. I know it's a scary thing to kind of hold on to, but it's worth holding on to, because good things can happen from holding on to hope. So I thought that was beautiful, and it resonated with Leo. I'd skipped over it. I think it was earlier in the episode when Ben was kind of worried, like, man, how is this all going to play out? And Jen was like, all right, I'm going to tell you this story. She's like, okay, there was like a rabbit downriver, and this guy grabbed it, and it was about to drown, but the guy saved it. And another rabbit, and he saved that one too. And it's like, okay. And she's going on. It's like, yeah, there's a farmer upstream, and it's like, okay, where is this a story or something? It's like, no, it's a story. And it's basically like, right, if you try and change the farmer, then like the bunnies might die or something. She, apparently we find out later on, she butchered the story, but I think the metaphor is supposed to be like we know what the end result metaphor was supposed to be, but I think the story is supposed to be like, if you try and get the farmer to change his ways, he might do it, but he might deal with the bunnies a different way, and that means the bunnies won't be sent downstream to you where you can save them. They might get sent somewhere else and die. That might be where that story's going. It might actually be like oh God, what are they called? Not a folklore necessarily, but like those, I don't know, I can't think of the word for them, but they're those stories that you're supposed to learn a moral lesson from, like the boy who cried wolf type of situation. Like, it's stories like that. I forgot what they're actually called. There's a word that describes them, like, that are just meant to be like, oh, you're supposed to learn a moral lesson from them. But anyway, Jen butchered the story, but the whole point of the story is, when you do what you do, Ben. You save everyone every time you go from leap to leap, but you're also trying to change the future, which is a lot. That's too much for anyone to do, but you still try to do it, and you succeed in doing that. You are someone that is saving everyone's lives day at a time, but you're also like trying to change the future. And it's like, so it's like, that's something only you can do. So believe in yourself in this regard that you can end up helping Camilo. So I thought that was beautiful. And ultimately, Ben was working on the closing argument, and obviously was able to kind of fix things between Alita and Vicky. And it was like, I got one question for you. Did you reschedule our Saturday anniversary dinner or whatever? She's like, Vicky's like, I'm going to get on top of that. Because she ended up finding out, yes, Barnes is a terrible guy. Even later on saying like, right, I looked into, there are at least 8 other cases where he hid evidence type of situation. So she ended up bringing it up to the DA, and ultimately he ends up taking the fall for it. I didn't know if when Ben gave his closing arguments, I don't know, because like you saw the ADA Barnes, I thought like maybe he was going to have like a moment of conscience, because I was thinking maybe this is the one time he did it, but it's like, no, because like I said, the other 8 times he's done it, we didn't find out about that till later, like after Ben had already given the closing argument. But I was wondering like, oh, is Barnes going to have a change of heart during this situation? It's like, no, he was just looking like, oh crap, you might be swaying the jury your way. So, but also telling about who Camilo was. It's like, yes, he got in an argument with this particular person because this person was trying to recruit his brother. It's like, this is a person who dropped out of high school, working 2 jobs just to support his family. The fact of the matter is, when facing 30 years, potentially life in prison, what was the first thing out of his mouth? What's going to happen to my brother? This is who he is. He is someone that will fight tooth and nail for the people he loves. And even Ben saying that same thing. And obviously for Nikki, obviously she's hearing Alita say that, and obviously that means a lot to her. So like, those words Ben said meant what he was saying, because obviously Addison was there in the courtroom for him. And it's like, yeah, they really missed each other. But Ben gave a beautiful closing argument. To me, that was one of my favorite aspects of any lawyer thing, is that closing arguments, because that's when it's like, yo, we got to hit them, got to give it all, we got to give a great speech just to, finally like nail it, because that closing argument could be the deciding factor, because even Ziggy said like, yeah, this is going to be a 50-50 shot on how this is all going to play out. So ultimately, we find out that Camilo ended up getting free, and it turns out later on that Leo ended up becoming a lawyer all those years later, because being in a courtroom, and also Alita and Vicky ended up becoming lawyers at the Innocence Project. So I thought that was beautiful in that regard. I also love that it's like, oh, how was Jen? Oh, Jen was good, but she butchered Magic's story. I was like, that story Magic tells us all the time about the rabbits. It's like, wait, you remember Magic? Said, yeah, I just remembered Magic. I was like, yo, that's dope. But I love that, because I love this whole betting thing, because earlier in the episode, it's like, oh, Leaper X. And it's like, and Jin hold out her hand. It's like, what? You said Leaper X. And it's like, and Ian pays her. It's like, Martinez. And then it's like, oh, we gotta find Leaper X. And then like, holds her hand out. And then Magic's like, no, I did say Leaper X. It's like, yeah, you did. You actually said it twice now. It's like, my wallet's upstairs. It's like, okay, so now Ian had to cover for Magic in that regard. But then later on, Jin ended up having to pay Magic. And Ian's like, what? Magic didn't say Leaper X? It's like, yes, but Ben remembered Magic first. And it's like, ugh, I guess they had a bet on who he would. It's like, Jin's like, I was with them for 2 days, and then I tell one Magic story. Ian's like, badly. And all of a sudden he remembers Magic, you know? So I love that. I thought that was, but I love that this, you know, Addison was like, I appreciate this situation because it's like, it made me realize that sometimes, sometimes doing the right thing is kind of like, doesn't make it suck any less, but she had to take a step back in this regard because Ben needed Jin's help in this regard. And so it's like, okay. And, it's like, right, you get to do the honors, and she's the one that got to look up what happened to everyone's future, and she started tearing up, and, Magic had to pay Addison. So I'm like, what was that deal of like, oh, like when this is all said and done, Jin's going to end up crying or something? And she's like, I saw that. I was like, what was the bet? But either way, I thought I was kind of bummed too. I was about to say, man, I mean, because Ben, sadly, Ben doesn't always get to stick around. It's like, right, you didn't get to stick around for the results. Obviously, you find out about him from the team, but you also, same thing with like episode 12, the game. It's like, I mean, you saw like the final shot and everything, but you never got to celebrate afterwards. It's like, yeah, when your job's done, so you don't get to enjoy those bits. I guess it's like, right, the person who you leaped into, let them have this moment. So it's not your moment to necessarily have. You were there just to help out, but still. So I thought that was pretty neat. And then the next leap Ben finds himself in, he's being, I'm assuming, sent to like an institution or whatever because a wife is like, oh, my husband, honey, you're not okay. I'm like, the moment that got set up the way, I'm like, is she trying to like destroy your brain or whatever, send you to a facility to get it, like, you know, I'm like, we might kind of be into like some old school, like, oh God, what are sanatorium type of stuff. Like, or just maybe just institutions in the old, you know, it's like, yeah, like how they cure people, you know, asylum type of places. That might be what he's being put into, but part of me is like, it feels like his wife is pushing for that too much. I mean, to be fair, it's like times like that is when a woman would sadly get sent there because it's like, oh, she's being hysterical. It's like, oh, you know, and it's like, oh, like something's wrong with my wife. I got to send her. That's why I like think it's interesting that it seems like the shoe's on the other foot in that regard. Also, the actor who plays the doctor in that regard, I'm like, oh, dude, that actor, I feel like he always gets like typecast as like a creepy dude. Like you've seen that actor in so many things. One of the things that comes to my mind, one of the creepy characters he had to play was a character named Smoothie on the show Happy. On Sci-Fi. It's like, it's, you know, if you've never seen Happy, I highly recommend you check it out. Sadly, the show got canceled after its second season, but I still think it's well worth checking out. And like he plays a really twisted character named Smoothie. It's a whole thing. But it seems like we might be getting another creepy episode, like the episode it's probably not going to be as creepy as the episode from episode 7, the kind of Exorcist episode, the one that came out in Halloween. But it looked like it might at least have some creepy elements to it in some, like, I guess, mad scientist type of way. Once again, I said it every time. I just love how this show can just, like, switch genres and be different shows within a single show. I think that it gives this show allows the show just to kind of be whatever it needs to be per episode type of thing. So I always love that. So like this aspect, like once again, this episode being like a courtroom drama. But either way, I'm very excited to ultimately see where everything ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good